I am here with Father Séamus Doyle, who has written a wonderful new book. It is First Century Seekers, Eyewitnesses to the Gospel. Would you like to do a reading? Is that something you would like?
Okay. The biblical story of James and John. Then the mother of the sons of Zebedee came to him with her sons, and kneeling before him, she asked a favor of him. And he said to her, "What do you want?" She said to him, "Declare these two sons of mine will sit, one at your right hand and one at your left in your kingdom." But Jesus answered, "You do not know what you are asking. Are you able to drink the cup that I am about to drink?" They said to him, "We are able." He said to them, "You will indeed drink my cup, but to sit at my right hand and at my left, this is not mine to grant, but it is for those for whom it has been prepared by my Father." So Salome comes to the group on the first day of the week, and she tells her story. "Good evening, everyone. I am so glad to have been able to gather. We have been able to gather today. Sorry that we had to change meeting locations, but such are the times. I understand some of you have heard Zebedee tell his story about Rabbi Jesus. I won't tell his story. I will tell you mine. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Salome, the mother of James and John. I am also an aunt of Jesus, as I am also Mary's sister. Am I not well connected? Let me tell you something. To my nephew Jesus, being well connected did not mean anything. One day we thought he was losing his mind, as he seemed to have been without sleep for a few days and had been talking to people for hours without food. When we tried to get to him, he was told that his mother was looking for him. I couldn't believe the remark he made. "Who is my mother and who are my brothers?" Then he pointed to his disciples, saying, "Here are my mother and my brothers. For whoever does the will of my Father in heaven is my brother and sister and mother." My sister said nothing, but I was not going to let him treat her like that. I took Jesus aside and told him he ought to have more respect for his mother. Did I put my foot in my mouth? Both feet. Jesus just laughed. That was one thing about him that always fascinated me. Nothing ever seemed to bother him. It was as if he had a bigger picture of the world than the rest of us. He looked at life and our beliefs from a frame of reference not known to anyone else in the family or in the synagogue. He had a point of view about family and the Lord that few people understood then or now. His understanding of the Torah was refreshingly different, and yet many of his family thought if they were associated with him, they too might get tainted with being his followers. Incredible as it may appear, the reality was that some of our family put a lot of distance between them and Jesus. Jesus never complained. He loved them anyhow. But that's not the point of my story. What I want to tell you is about how I really put my foot in my mouth by asking that my sons sit one at his right and the other at his left in his administration. Mary and I talked about Jesus, and she let me know she was concerned about him in a good way. She kept telling me she had no idea how he came to the ideas he was teaching. I thought I listened to him carefully, but I came to a different conclusion than Zebedee. Zebedee knew my sister Mary first. He met her when he came looking for someone to build his boats and was directed to Joseph. Mary was 4 years older than I. Zebedee's first wife had died in childbirth. After her death, he turned all his energy into building his own fishing business. He worked even harder than ever before. The marriage which had arranged for me failed to materialize as the young man was killed in a revolt against the Romans. Joseph suggested that a marriage be arranged between Zebedee and me, and soon we were betrothed and married. It was my belief that Jesus was God's champion who was going to bring Israel into a leadership position in the world with peace and justice instead of war. Zebedee did not trust the Zionist movement, and he worked too closely with the Romans to be associated with anyone with rebel tendencies. Zebedee looked at the Roman situation, as he called it, like a businessman. War, he said, was good for some businesses and not good for others. He did not, however, believe that Israel should stand a prolonged fight with the Romans. He did not want any of his friends, and certainly not his sons, killed in a senseless skirmish with them either. I knew our sons looked up to Jesus as a leader. Despite his initial misgivings, Zebedee talked to Jesus and eventually gave his blessing for James and John to join him as soon as he was ready. As I said, it was my conviction that Jesus should be king. I thought he would be a better king than David, as he had more ethics and justice than any of our other kings. He was fascinating. What was fascinating about him was that many of the Romans loved him as he talked with them. He even brought the child of a centurion back to life. The wife of one of the Roman centurions became a follower of his. I chose to believe Jesus was creating signs that the days of vengeance were coming to an end, that peace was coming closer. The ones we were more afraid of were our own religious leaders. They had become puppets of Herod rather than real religious leaders. These men looked at Jesus as a rebellious peasant upstart who was bent on the disruption of the commerce of the temple. James and John often talked a lot about what they would do or what they would like to do in the kingdom when it would be established. They were not, however, like their dad. I took it upon myself to make what I thought was a reasonable request. Much as I wanted to see Jesus as God's champion and free of us from the Romans, he did not appear to have any plans for an immediate army. With no army, Jesus was not going to get far. However, having listened to his powers of persuasion, there was nothing I felt certain Jesus could not do. We, like so many others, placed incredible expectations on him. Probably it was more difficult for me because he was family, and I wanted to see him king. Mary did not share my enthusiasms and avoided any discussion on the topic. I was not about to stand by and watch my children support him and then not be rewarded. I had seen that with Herod's family too many times, so I simply waited till I got a good opportunity and then hit him with it. I'm embarrassed. As I think about it now, I actually got on my knees and said, "Declare that these two sons of mine will sit one at your right hand and one at your left in your kingdom." I was begging him to announce the positions he would give them in his kingdom. Jesus just put out his hand, turned my face upwards, knelt beside me, looked directly into my eyes in his calm, gentle manner, and then looked at my sons. There was that gentleness about him that told you he cared, and at the same time a strength that let one know he knew who he really was in charge. He looked at James and John and simply asked them if they believed they had what it took to be in leadership positions. Like me, they impulsively said yes. I expected that out of them. They were ambitious, but they lacked that ingredient which gave them the courage of their convictions. They had the ability to do anything provided they had a strong leader to follow. They had an incredible faith in Jesus. They worshipped the ground he walked on. I knew in my heart the love they had for Jesus and that they would die for him if they had to. It was much later when I came to understand more of what Jesus was really about. His was not to be an earthly kingdom. The peace he brought was treacherous, one might say. Only those who walked in the path he taught could find that peace. It was a path of inner peace. It was a path that included everyone. James and John were well equipped to handle that. And as I discovered even more, James gave his life for his belief in Jesus. Initially, Zebedee and I became silent followers of Jesus. After his crucifixion, we thought it all over. Then we heard word that he had appeared to Mary Magdalene, some of the other women, and also to some of his disciples. About 40 days after he died, Peter and the rest decided it was time to stop hiding and to continue the work that Jesus had begun. So we joined them in that great work of bringing people back to God and living up to our covenant with the Lord. I don't think, in fact, I know, if I have never been at peace within myself in my life as I am these days. I never considered having Samaritans as friends. I never thought I'd see the day I'd have Romans sitting at my table. Jesus' ways are definitely God's ways, and it's sometimes difficult to live up to his standards. I am so grateful to have these memorial meals so we can share our experience and get strength from one another to this great work. Thank you all for being here.
Thank you.
Thank
Father
you.
Doyle.
Appreciate it.
Have a great day. All right.